Welcome back, everyone, to another build review. Today we're going to be reviewing another contest, or some plots from another contest. It's actually the first of its kind. Hopefully, more of it will be to come.
I certainly hope so. This was awesome. We were both judges for this comp, and there were a lot of submissions. How many submissions were there? Like 400?
No, there weren't 400. There were over 300 or 400 plots claimed, but I think overall submissions might have been a little over 100. But then we narrowed it down to about 98 gradable plots. Some of those probably weren't even gradable per se, but yeah, we judged about 98 or so plots, which was
that was a lot.
I've never judged a comp this big. It took forever.
I did not know what I was signing up for when Mike asked me, to be honest. He was like, all right, here you go, 98 plots. And I was like, I thought this was going to be 10. Yeah, it was an insane competition.
The Kibo contest that I've judged before, it usually has maybe around 30-ish plots to judge. So this was about 3 times as big as that.
What do you think made the difference?
Probably just because more people build structure. Since it's structure focused, there's not as many people who are willing to put the time and effort into doing organic-based builds. At least that's just what I think.
And I think that it's a really interesting competition to actually be able to do, because a lot of building competitions, the organics start to take the limelight a lot of times, just because a lot of technical builders build organics. It's almost hard to judge a structure against an organic. It's like 2 completely different builds, 2 different scales.
That's kind of why this contest was created to begin with, to counter that, because typically organics tend to win contests, not because necessarily they're better. I guess judges tend to pick those as winners. This contest was designed for the structure builders out there who wanted to have a chance at winning a contest against the organics builders. It's a very big contest, and we have a lot of plots that we want to go over. We can't possibly cover all of them. There were so many good ones, but I'm going to try as much as I can to get through some of the better ones. Before we start talking about all of these plots, the theme for this structure contest was solitary. There were some really great interpretations of that theme. I thought this one was one of the more unique ones. There were maybe a couple other spaceship-based ones, but I just loved the aesthetics of this plot and how abstract it looked, which was one of the other categories that someone could be entering to win, is best abstract plot. I don't know, this build is just so crazy to look at, and I love the uniqueness of the style. It doesn't look like a style that you would see anywhere else.
I remember this one because this was the first one on the judging sheet of the entire 98 ones, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's going to be 97 more plots like this that I have to judge, because I feel like this entire build is like a meal. Like you have to fly through for a while to be able to digest all of it.
And this is actually not even as much of a meal as some of the others, which is crazy.
I know, I know. What do you think of this build?
Oh, I liked it. It does have some interior, which was really fun to explore because it was actually a lot more interior than I thought it would be. Once you actually started exploring it, you realize that it goes pretty far and has all these different rooms, and they're all labeled. And it just feels, I don't know, it just feels like a spaceship inside. You know, it's not super open except for the main room, and then you've got this little spaceship here in the main room.
Honestly, I don't even think that I've seen all of this. I saw the main room and a couple of the side rooms.
It actually took me a while to even find the control room at the top. I didn't even realize that was there until my second or third time looking at this plot. That's just how much there is to find. And I love how this has, up in the control room, a solar system projected on the ceiling, which is pretty cool.
Wow. That's a nice touch. Oh.
Yeah, and there's a shrieker there.
Yep, I figured that one out. All right. Yeah, I'm muting that. The thing that kind of struck me about this build was the backdrop, really. I just thought that the overall composition, they took a lot of time trying to map that out. There are a couple of qualms that I have with it, like the trees, very obviously just spikes.
To me, they look alien.
I thought that there were a couple parts that could have been smoothed more, at least on the trunks. I think that the leaves are really cool. There's like this one node right here that caught my eye immediately, and it seems like it was intentional, but it also seemed like they could have spent a little bit more time on it. I know it's not the focal point, but that just kind of stuck out to me. But like everything else,
about the background. I love it.
I didn't really notice that as much as just lack of detailing blocks anywhere on the outside. Even outside of the spaceship, there might be some, but it also could have been for lack of time. That was probably going to be an excuse for many of these builders. They just didn't have time to finish their build to the extent that they would have liked.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also a lot of those colored blocks that don't really have any detailing blocks that go well with them, like the blue. What can you do to detail that? Not very much.
No, it would take some doing. You'd probably have to change up the palette pretty extremely. I think that there were definitely opportunities to detail more, but it definitely intimidated me because I don't think I had ever been on Builder's Refuge before this, and just having this be like the first plot that greets me, I'm like, oh man, A, this is going to take a lot of time, but B, I'm going to learn a lot because it's like a truly humbling conglomeration of builds that we're reviewing.
Overall, I really did like this plot.
Right here at the plot teleport, it says that they ran out of time. It's pretty obvious that they know what they're doing through a lot of especially the docks. I feel like this is how the whole thing would look if they hadn't run out of time. It follows the theme really well, but I think it has kind of like a brighter take on it. My only real qualm is the side buildings. I know they're not supposed to be focal points. They're supposed to contrast the focal point, but it seems like they could have done more.
Anything in particular you're thinking of?
Texturing, big time. Like, yeah, you're right in that dark palette. Like, you've got a lot of options there.
I mean, there is texturing, but it's very subtle.
I think that there could have been a little bit more to where it's not going to steal the show,
but still give it a little bit more depth. What about you?
I really like the colors, and honestly, it's the colors that really make this fit the theme of Solitary, because it makes the one building in the center stand out. There were also some really great interiors on this, even though there weren't a whole lot of rooms that were made. The rooms that are made were done really, really well. I would have liked to see just more interiors in general, and I know, again, time is an issue, and there was 3 weeks for this contest, but yeah, people still have other obligations. I loved how much detail there is even in such a small space. Like, there was a lot of time and effort put into this. Even in the color of the water, you'll see how it's bright toward the center and then it gets darker towards the edges. So even the water is emulating this block of light right over this building. And even the ship is dark in theme because it has sailed into the darker waters. It's almost like there's a beam of colored light coming right in the center of the plot, which is pretty cool because even the trees are emulating that.
I always love seeing that biome texturing in the water. It's a good touch. I love the intentionality. It almost reminds me of Up, the movie Up.
Oh, yeah. This one actually won for the best realism category because of all of the attention to detail that was put into it. It's just a bit crazy once you start to actually explore it. There are screws in every piece of wood. There's a generator down here, and there's all these cables that actually connect up into the tower that also go inside the walls, where you'll also see proper insulation. And the cord does wrap all the way around until it reaches this mega-sized power strip. I just love the attention to detail in this one and how much fun it is to explore. And if you go through some of the drawers, you'll even find like hidden surprises.
I didn't even look through the drawers. Oh, okay. Well,
I knew it.
Did you go up in the attic?
Yes, I did actually. I thought that was a great touch.
There's a lot of hidden details up here. There's an old typewriter. The dust everywhere is crazy. And then there's a spider web in the corner with a spider. And even a box of steak.
A box of steak?
There's a box of steak in the attic.
What? Did you ever read The Borrowers?
Yeah, I think I'm familiar with it.
Yeah, like The Secret Life of Ariadne, all of that stuff.
It almost makes me want to see just like little tiny civilizations in here. I didn't think about that until now, but man, there's a lot that you could do here. Conceptually, I think that it's like super in-depth, really well done. Look, there's even the little BR bookend.
Yeah, and Dirt Hut Snow Globe.
No, I even like over here how they have the desktop icons or the laptop icons on the taskbar. I think that's like a great touch. The thing that like kind of stuck with me whenever I think about this build is just like the wood grain. They did an exceptional job with that. I don't even want to know how long that took.
I'm pretty sure each board of wood also has its own unique wood grain. There is no copy and paste in that.
I don't want to even think about how long that took. but I respect the commitment.
I think this build took this builder over 200 hours.
Really? Wow. Respect.
If I had to be very nitpicky, was just the scale of some of these things are off. The larger you go, the harder it is to get scale accurate. The fact that this outlet or this power strip is massive compared to everything else, it's almost as big as the shoes over here. The door was the number one thing I noticed because it's not even as tall as the windows, but I can see why it's lower is so they could fit that TV screen above it. I wonder if there would have been another spot for that, though, where the door could have been up to the same height as the windows. I think it might have looked a little better.
They put so much detail on this, it almost feels like they may have been here in person. This feels like a recreation of someone's room, almost. I mean, I know it's a fire tower.
Which is why it did win for Best Realism, which was well-deserved.
I agree.
So, the Panopticon.
The what?
It's called a Panopticon. This is like a prison tower. I learned that recently when Taco Squad told me about it, and he said that he really loves Panopticons. And I asked, what's a Panopticon? And that's what this is. This is insane. Obviously, you're going to have a lot of stacking and that kind of stuff within this type of build just by its nature because it's a prison, But I think that the builder did a really good job of breaking that up so that it doesn't just feel super duper monotonous. And it follows the theme really well just through the solitary confinement of the wither and everything. What do you think of this build?
I loved this build the more I explored it. I gained a lot more appreciation for it once I started to actually explore it in more detail. When you go into this building at the top, you're greeted by one lectern, and then you can continue to follow these arrows all the way through to find more lecterns, and as each lectern will reveal a little bit more of the story of this plot and why it's here. And at the end, you do get to read all of the books at once, or you can see them all. For anyone who may not get a chance to read this, because I don't know if everyone's going to have permissions to read the lecterns on these plots, so I wanted to really quickly just go over the books on this particular plot, so you can get the basic story of it. In 2031, the Wither, overlord of the skeleton army, opened up dimensional portals from every fortress in the Nether and launched an all-out assault on the inhabitants of the overworld. The war was waged over 45 grueling years, finally ending when a group of brave heroes traversed through one of the portals into the Nether and captured the Wither. The war stopped abruptly, with all the portals closing at the same time, leaving countless soldiers from the Wither's army trapped in the overworld. They needed a place to be held captive to not cause any more harm. Hence, the stronghold was built. Thousands of cells were built to keep the skeletons locked up. Many were interrogated to find the root cause behind the assault, but every one of them only ever replied with bone noises. The prison had all the amenities the skeletons required to stay alive, but with no answers coming in, the legitimacy of the stronghold came under scrutiny. Several cafeterias were built to feed the thousands of skeletons, but after realizing that skeletons don't eat food, it was a pointless addition to the stronghold. Millions of carrots and potatoes went to waste. The prison goes over 360 meters down into the soil, requiring multiple elevators to get officers between levels. By 2052, the stronghold was running out of funding to keep management going, and a new threat was on the rise: growing inflation. Over the next few years, the management team at the stronghold slowly retired from service, leaving thousands of skeletons to sit in their cells alone. The next 50 years was a tragedy for the stronghold. The few remaining management workers refused to take captured skeletons down into the cells as they feared for their lives, being outnumbered 2,000 to 1. Instead, they would just toss the skeletons off the edge from above, resulting in a mass pileup of skeleton remains at the bottom of the stronghold. All other skeletons that were locked in their cells suffered from erosion, with their bodies eventually giving up from erosion processes and collapsing in a heap. By 2105, there were no skeletons left. All that was left was the Wither, the overlord of the skeletons. Cursed with eternal life, it was forced to live out eternity in solitude, surrounded by the decaying and eroding carcasses of his fallen army. With its power drained, all it can do is sit in silence, waiting. This was actually not the only plot that had some kind of story and thing you could explore to find more about it. But I do think that this one was the most well done in that respect. It felt so immersive the more you walked through it, and once you got the full story of it. Now, I know that you don't have to have a full story to your plot to be able to win the competition, but it just did grow a lot more appreciation for the vision of this builder by having that there.
That always helps me get more into a build as well, as when I can put myself into the teeny tiny details. That, at least for me, allows me to work on a project a lot longer than normally would if I was just building it off of aesthetics. Having that intentionality in any build is going to positively benefit it, at least I think.
And this one did win Best Interior. One thing I did really like about the interior of this that's different from some of the other plots that are there, because it was a pretty common theme for a plot or a build to look abandoned with this theme. I really liked the fact that this one, for some reason, felt more abandoned to me just based on little details like adding the dead bushes in the hallways and just growth everywhere. Whereas some of the other plots, they might look abandoned on the outside, but not as much on the inside. And I just like how this one feels abandoned even when you're inside of it. This next plot is a very unique one. It's also the winner of the entire competition. There are multiple winners for multiple things, but this was the best of show winner. It's just filled with so much beautiful details in it. I think it's supposed to be a spaceship of sorts that is an AI. That used to be, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't it a civilization at one point, and now it's left abandoned to roam freely through space all alone? There's just a lot of beautiful details in it. It doesn't have any interior, but just the overall execution of the outside color schemes and details I really liked.
I don't really have much bad to say about this build. It's beautiful. I think that what impressed me the most is just with all of the detail and all of the colors that the builder used, there's a lot going on here, but it doesn't feel like that. And they were able to strike that balance between having a lot of stuff to incorporate and incorporating them all together. So it feels like everything fits. I think that a lot of just these big mashup type builds, this isn't a mashup. It's like big amorphous
all the blending
structure.
of styles.
Yeah, there's just like there's a lot here, but it all works together. And the way that they use lines, like I'm just looking up here at the top central bit, they just use the lines to divide a lot of these sections. A lot of time has to be taken in order to make sure that that all works together.
The only thing about this plot that I noticed was it does look incomplete. Especially on the lower half, you'll see some blank sections that look like something is supposed to go there, or like this hole in the back where you can fly into it and, clearly see that there's like nothing inside. There's this one strip on the far, I don't know if this is the right or left of the build, but this part over here where it's incomplete, not fully textured, even though it is on all of the other pieces like it. So despite the fact that this builder ran out of time and didn't get to finish the plot, it still won. It's a good testament to the skill of this builder. It's fun to examine all the details in this one, and I think has a very strong theme interpretation.
We spawn in on the plot. It's on the backside of the build. To me, I'm thinking that this is the focal point just to start. And I was like, oh, okay, man, they really didn't do much with the texturing. Like, it's textured, but like it feels like it could have been done more. And then I go over and I realized I was looking at the back. Yeah, this is just an awesome way to incorporate shading in this. I always love seeing this kind of stuff. This is my preference when I build as well. It definitely distinguishes itself as very unique, and it accomplishes the theme really well. And just the amount of detail in like the chair and just how they tried their best to keep the lighting consistent throughout all of it. Can definitely see that there was a lot of time spent in here and a lot of unique blocks used too. Just ones that aren't always typically thought of when you're doing this kind of thing.
When you first look at it, you're instantly drawn to just the overall texturing and the custom shadows. But then once you get closer, you'll see just how detailed it is. When you go inside, I was blown away by how detailed the inside is. I loved this
Yeah.
interior. I think this was my favorite interior of all of them, just for how detailed it was. It did get second for best interior. And you kind of forget how small it is or how small it looks on the plot when you go inside.
Yeah.
It feels a lot bigger than it looks from the outside.
The texturing definitely almost makes it feel smaller, which, that's the point. Like on the outside, yeah, this thing is gigantic once you get in here. I'm trying to go through and decipher what all of this stuff is over here. This is the thing I'm stuck on. Is it just machinery?
I just say equipment. That's what I would say.
Okay. Equipment. Yep. Love it. And I appreciate that they made the door diagonal and they used those
A truly
signs.
diagonal door, yes. Now that we
Yes.
can do that with the hanging signs, that's nice.
Mhm.
And I love how the bed is just tucked away in this little corner of the house. But it's got all of the amenities, anything you could possibly need to actually live here. You've got your little kitchenette. You've got your bathroom. Oh, this is a person. What does that sign say? Ignore organic. He's just here to sell the
He's just here
story.
to sell the story.
So I didn't even see that in all the times I've looked through this build.
Did you see this?
Where? No. There's storage and dust under
It's
here.
dust bunnies. That's fun. I can walk through one room 4 different times and just see new things because there's just so much. Like right here, the garbage bin.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this one has excellent debugging in it, too. I loved the debugging use in this
The shower head's very impressive.
Even the shelf on it. This is another reason why judging this contest took so long, because just exploring every plot, it felt like this on many of them, where you just get lost in all of the details and discovering new things. I don't think anyone would argue the fact this was the craziest plot of all of them.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Debug galore.
This is an insane build. I think that it helps if you just go and turn your brightness down if it's up a little bit more.
I actually have my night vision on while I'm looking at these. Yeah, okay, here it is with the night vision off. I wonder if people get annoyed by me looking at all these builds with night vision on. I'm just so used to it, I don't think about it. So sorry if I'm bothering anyone by doing that. For me, this build is just lacking in theme interpretation. It's very possible it was trying to go for best debugged or one of the other categories in the competition as well.
I get it. I think that it's more of a stretch than some of the others. And so when you're judging builds against one another, and that's one of the categories, then it's probably going to score lower when there's more of a stretch in theme. That being said, in terms of technical skill with the debugging, there's a lot to unpack, but I feel like the closer you get, the more you appreciate it. My biggest qualm with this build is just the full view. There's a lot of competing elements, I feel.
That might have been the point.
It just seems like we're kind of... I know. The other plot that we saw, that one, I think that they were also trying to balance a lot of elements, but they integrated them a lot more, and I feel like I almost get lost in a lot of the visuals, and they blend together, it feels like, unless you get to a certain distance away. I think that one of my favorite parts of this build is this cathedral in the back left, but it's completely covered by this wing from the main viewing angle.
Yeah, a lot of interesting details, and there's even a few organic things mixed in, but they're so vague. Like this little dragon-like thing, I think it's a dragon. I'm not sure what it is on that cathedral that you mentioned. And then there's also these goat heads everywhere, or ram heads, sorry. Looks like a ram. It's one of those plots though where I look at it and I don't really know what I'm looking at, but you can't stop looking at it. That's what I get when I look at this build.
I think that this one definitely intrigued me the most when I judged it. I always want to see more because there's always more to ingest whenever you fly to a new area. Back here, this more pagoda-ish style in the back right.
Yeah.
That's just tucked back in there. Don't even see it.
So many styles. This next plot is my personal favorite. It did win second overall and also won best in the epic category or epic mega build. This was just such a beautiful build inside and out. It has a similar concept to that prison one we looked at where it's kind of sunken in the ground. But this one feels very different all the same because it's not the same type of build at all. The most impressive thing about it is just looking at it without night vision on and looking at all of the custom lighting everywhere. All of the light that hits everything in this build was customly added. You even have these floating plant particles. They're probably just really small plants, but they're inside the sunlight beam coming down so that you can actually see it more visibly. That's just crazy, that level of attention to detail. Even in the water, you'll see custom lighting for the ripples, the reflection of the ripples in the water. Everywhere you look, there's just little details like that added, and it makes the build so immersive.
I think that that's a huge level of creativity, and it shows that, like, if you can think that critically about blocks like that, you know what you're doing. I think that this build definitely, in terms of like technical skill and just creative use of blocks, it definitely stands apart from the rest. Compositionally, it's pretty sound as well. I think it feels a little empty, but I know that's the point. Solitary. I think that there could have been a little bit more something that fits the scale, because like if we're talking about like the grass and stuff, these are just like little tiny moss particles, but you could have had an organic bush or something like that. Maybe they were afraid of doing too many organics and turning it into a structure housing a lot of organics.
I don't think that would have been an issue, but yeah.
My only qualm was it felt a little sparse on the outer bits, but it's not a huge issue.
The one thing I noticed about it from a structural standpoint that could be improved, there's a lot of revolve used here, obviously, because it's circular, but I noticed that these corner domes are not perfect circles, they're actually ovals. And I don't know if that was just a miscalculation because when you're building, sometimes things just happen. You're like, oh, well, this isn't supposed to be this way, but maybe, I'll just go with it. I don't know if this was supposed to be an oval or not, but I just noticed that some of them are circles, but on the corners, they're ovals for the domes.
I think they were limited by plot size.
Possibly. When you look at it from above, you'll notice that only the circular ones are poking up above the sand. The ones that are more oval shaped are mostly buried to kind of mask the fact that they are a different shape. I would assume that it wasn't supposed to be that way. That was just one technical error I noticed. But I think really what sells the build is just the ambience of the lighting and the attention to detail there. I also like how the sand is spilling in on the sides. I think that really adds a lot too. But I do agree with you about the more growth, or at least larger plant life would have probably improved it a little bit.
In this build competition, I don't know how many cathedrals there were, but I think that this one definitely stood apart from the others. Not just the detailing, because whenever you talk about cathedrals or anything in this more Gothic style, a lot of the attention is going to be brought into the details, but just the combinations of colors, it works really well, and it stands out from the terrain. I don't even know if this is a classic cathedral design, but like it's a very overbuilt type of thing with the Gothic style. But I think that this one stands out to me as not a typical cathedral, and I appreciate that. I also like the blending of styles, just like the contrast between the ruins down below and the very elegant cathedral on top. I think that it works really well.
Yeah, the colors is really what made it stand out to me too. I love the colors on this plot. There are some things I'm noticing though, like how the cathedral is raised up on a pedestal of rock, but these doors, for example, they lead to nowhere. Yeah, there's some parts of it that look a little incomplete, but overall it's really beautiful build. The other thing that I noticed, I just felt like a lot of the windows, even with all these details, they almost felt too airy, if that makes sense. I almost felt like they were too spindly, or it didn't look very solid.
Yeah, you can definitely see through them.
Maybe it just needs an extra layer of glass or something behind it to make it feel more solid. I do have my night vision on, but even with that off, maybe they're too spread out for some of the windows. And it does have some interior, not a fully furnished interior, but at least it has a floor design and some details in the doors and such.
Now that you kind of say that, the walls feel very thin.
Yeah, maybe that's the word I'm looking for. I feel like that with the windows though. They almost look like they can't
Yeah.
support the structure above them just because of how thin they look. Yeah, when looking at it without night vision on, it does help a little bit, but you can still see straight through to the other side. Overall, I do love this build. It's so pretty. This build was one that I think just grew on me over time. I feel overall it has beautiful details. This has the very ornate flowery shapes and organic shapes. It could have stood more texturing. I also really liked, though, how it handled the outside. They could have just settled for the inside like it was, but there was a little bit of effort put into making the outside look more ruined. If there had been enough time for this plot to be completely finished with good texturing and maybe even plant growth around, it would have been so beautiful. I'm not exactly sure why over here the terrain just kind of stops and it's a flat edge on this side. I thought that was a bit strange, unless it was all about lighting and getting lighting in there. I'm not sure. So there are parts about this plot that feel incomplete, but I really liked the direction it was going.
These are some of the best shaping with blocks at this scale that I've seen. I think that it's incredibly organic and ornate on some of these, but like you said, it's incomplete in some places. It's really, really white. It's really white. There's like so much to where it competes with a lot of those details. Like the details, thankfully, with the black stained glass behind it, they stand out from the rest of it a little bit more. I feel like there could have been a lot more done to really pronounce those, because obviously those are the headliner of the build, I think.
It seems like a lot of the decisions to keep it white was to be able to use all of those detailing blocks.
Yeah, the dye,
it's so hard to have a good color scheme and have detailing blocks to use because we don't have gray trapdoors or anything like that.
They were probably married to the skulls too. That's probably a big limiting factor. Yeah, the trapdoors are definitely an issue. I think that like you can still kind of wiggle around it a little bit to where you can avoid those and like texture around.
There was a lot more focus put on detailing the different pieces and not as much on texturing. I can tell they're trying just to divide and conquer. There's just so much to focus on with this build. It's probably difficult. I just realized that there is this throne with, I guess, a dead king of sorts sitting in it.
Mm-hmm.
So that actually says that this is the proper scale of the build. This is actually a player scale build. I kind of wish that it did have more of a ruined look. It almost looks too clean and too new. Again, that kind of relates to texturing, but also you could have done things like broken walls or cracks in the walls, rubble that's just scattered on the walkways and stuff. So there's other things you can do if you don't want to introduce new colored blocks. Still wanted to go over this plot because I just think it's really beautiful and it deserves it.
So when I saw this one, I thought that it was a good adaptation of just a style that we saw a lot during this competition, which was the more Gothic. The normal form that took was a cathedral. So like having something that was a little bit more varied in terms of form was very nice. They did a pretty good job here with the solitary aspect. The rest of the build is pretty much colorless, and then the only thing with color is the rose. I think that's a good touch.
And the bell. There's a bell too. I'm not sure the significance of the bell though.
Yeah, I'd have to read through the description again.
Anytime I looked at it, I would look at it like this without night vision, but then with night vision disabled, all of the shadows make the forms more visible, I guess. Even though it has a very simplistic color palette, the shadows are what make it more dimensional. I still think it could have used more texture personally.
I agree.
But the details are very nice throughout.
The only thing that really stuck out to me is there is like pretty big lack of texture. Having that as a stylistic choice is one thing. We have so many gray blocks that we're able to mess with that a little bit, but it feels like a lot of it just feels very flat, unfortunately. The builder could have incorporated a little bit more. At first glance, I thought it was like you said, I looked at it without night vision on, and it felt kind of flat to me just on first glance. And then I got closer and I was like, oh, wow, this is actually really great.
Yeah, it's actually got tons of detail in it, but they all kind of blend with each other because they're similar colors or similar tones. I think it just could have used more contrast overall.
Yeah, just to like highlight all of those great details.
I did like how it had some kind of path for you to follow. So it doesn't have any real interiors, but it does have a little bit explorability about it on the outside, which was fun, just walking around it. And me being an organics person, I noticed that the leaves on the roses are a little bit too long and skinny.
Oh yeah, I totally noticed that. I didn't notice it. I thought that the rose was pretty good.
I do like the details of this. I just wish colors were handled in a way where you could see them better from a distance. Overall, a very beautiful build. I really like this next one. This one does showcase solitary very well. I actually was watching this one closely as it was going up, and I wasn't sure where the solitary aspect was coming in, but then it all came together at the end, and I do love how it portrays that. I like the ripples in the water and how it looks like it's covering this little bridge, so it looks like it's submerged underwater. One thing to note about this plot is it did win for the best survival friendly, so that was another category that people could compete for. It doesn't have any debugged blocks in it and theoretically could be built in survival. Even though it doesn't have any interior, actually, does the little house have an interior? Or no?
I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, this one does. This one has, I think, the only interior though. I don't think there's any in the bigger buildings.
No.
Still, it's a really pretty build and has lots of nice details.
Funny thing about this build, I found out after judging and such that the builder was one of my close friends, but what they did is they entered this competition anonymously and under like a different account and everything, and I knew that they were building in it, but they would not show me or tell me anything about their build because I was judging. There were a handful of plots that I thought that could have been theirs. But after the fact, knowing that this was their build, I was like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. Because I'm looking through, I spent a lot of time looking
There's
through.
Easter eggs that kind of give it away too.
Well, yeah. But I spent so much time looking through this and to see if there was anything debugged on it at all, because I was like, surely there has to be something. But I was like, oh wow, this is actually all survival friendly. And I mean, it's just a gorgeous build, and the more you look at it, the more you see.
Mm-hmm.
Like on this backside, it's just a completely different vibe wrapping around from the backside, and then the center. They're all kind of different styles, but they all work well and they're integrated well together.
What style would you say the build overall is?
From the front, I would say it's just more like Eastern Asian. On the backside, it adopts a little bit of like a dystopian type cyberpunk. I think that it has a lot of different styles. Overall, I think it's gorgeous. I think that they incorporated these round shapes within the pagodas really well to where they don't feel forced.
Nice steep roofs too. Yeah, it does have some industrial aspects to it too now that I'm looking at it toward the top. It's like a weird blend of industrial and kind of ancient looking. It's a really nice build, and I like the composition of it as well. Very eye-catching. This next one wasn't much to look at on the outside. In fact, it almost looks very incomplete, especially when you fly underneath. It just looks like the plot, could have had more done to it on the outside. However, I know that most of the work for this was done on the inside, and the inside is amazing. Yeah, I loved the interior on this one because it's supposed to look like a theater, but there's also a lot of other rooms inside. Like there's this whole library section with empty bookshelves. My favorite part is, of course, the actual theater and stage itself, and also the fact that this build was built to be survival friendly also is very impressive. And all of the great details that were included in the seating and the stage and everything. There are a few nitpicks I have, like some rooms you can't actually get to, but for what it is, for how much time they had to work on it, this was really good. And I love the exit signs too. I thought those were so creative.
The more that you walk around this build, the more there is to see. The fact that it's all survival friendly, but also player scale, and they had packed in all of this. It's just the scope of it is what I appreciate, and like the fact that they conceptually integrated the scavenger hunt within that. I thought that this was a very unique plot because of that.
I'm not quite sure how it communicates solitary.
Yeah, I kind of thought that as well. Like, I feel like it's a bit more of a stretch. I mean, I guess you could just go with it's a big empty theater, and it does feel empty when you walk around it almost, just because like there's not a lot of decorations.
I wonder if it was just entered for the survival category though, because it did get close. I think it got in the top 5 for survival friendly. I can't remember which placement it got. I really liked it, and I loved some of the details. I feel like all of these builds, they feel a lot bigger when they do have an interior to explore. Because looking at them from the outside, the building feels small on the large plot, but when you go inside, it feels so much bigger because of all the little details that you see surrounding everything.
Really puts it into perspective.
Yeah. Definitely one of the most fun builds to explore.
This one is a very industrial city. There's a lot to look at here for sure. I think that one of this build's greatest strengths is just like the street level detail. There's so much here, and I always think that when a builder like goes and thinks, oh, what typically is found on a street, and they kind of just dig deep and actually try to explore things that they wouldn't necessarily think of automatically. I think that's when a build really starts to evolve, because the buildings themselves are very good. I think that there are other buildings in this competition that surpass it, but maybe this kind of Brooklyn-esque style is just not really my preference. But I think that just how thorough the street deco is, it takes it up a notch for sure.
There were several city builds in this competition, and while this one doesn't really portray solitary, I was struggling to find the solitary theme within this plot. Despite that, I thought it was my favorite of all of the city builds just because of the level of attention to detail in the streets and the buildings too. Just going up into the buildings, they do have some really nice details. Random blocks used in one spot only, but it's also done in a way where it's not overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
It's all very purposeful. The more I explore it, I keep finding new details. I love that every building is different. It doesn't feel like there was any copy and pasting between buildings. Every building feels unique. I can't get over the fact that there's actually garbage bins and trash next to the street. And also these tents and this basketball court. I love all of these little details because none of the other city plots I saw had anything like that. Some of them there were some other ones that did have some things, but just not to this level of attention to detail. It might have also gotten in the top 5 for debugging because it has some great uses of it.
It really does. And like even on this, there's like back alleys and stuff that like are completely detailed and totally unique, but like it's just shoved off into a corner of the build that most people are never going to see.
Right. Yeah, there are no interiors on any of these buildings, I don't think. That's probably the one thing that could have been done. It looks like this, I found one building that's hollow in the inside. Maybe interiors were going to be done, just didn't have time for them. This would have been a very strong plot had it communicated the theme better, I think.
Yeah, I agree. This is such a unique plot in the whole competition. And I think that the contrasts in style and in palette between the buildings surrounding the centerpiece, it accomplishes the theme really well. I always love that Tibetan style. I've always wanted to build something like this. I mean, it's incredibly ornate, but I don't think it's overwhelming because there's a lot of good natural breaks in between a lot of the ornate stuff, except for maybe a little bit down at the bottom. There's a little bit of clutter. I mean, that's the main part of the build anyways. Even the interior, I mean, if you just look up at the ceiling, the amount of detail that goes into some of these ceiling tiles is crazy. That's what I've got so far. What about you?
I do love the details. And we should mention that it did win 3rd place in the Best of Show category and also won 1st place in the Best Debugged. Like you said, it does get busy in some places, but it doesn't really distract from the build because from a distance, it's all cohesive. It doesn't stand out or look like it doesn't belong there. Wow, there's even beds included in here as texturing. And I love these little statues everywhere. Look at this glass when you go up in here. Oh yeah, this part.
Oh.
I love this part.
I didn't notice that the first time. That's lovely.
Yeah, it looks like a deep well of water with particles falling inside. It's so pretty. Interesting how there was some attempt to finish the inside, except for that one room in the middle. But everywhere else, you've got the top part and the bottom part.
Maybe they just ran out of time.
I know, it is a lot of work. I can't imagine doing this in 3 weeks. It's a lot of work. That's how I feel like with a lot of the plots, though. Yeah, the background being asymmetrical helps too.
Well, also the fact that it's just like extremely, each one of these background structures is a box. And the centerpiece has a lot of very sharp edges. It's very pointed, and that brings it out quite a bit more.
The background buildings are basically the same box shape, just different heights, and then like different parts raised up to give it dimension. Nice, quick way of building a background. It's amazing what builders can get done in 3 weeks. I know some people complain about it not being long enough, or they run out of time, but some people are still able to get so much cranked out in that amount of time. It's really impressive. And the colors are beautiful. It standing out from the background really shows solitary.
Yep, beautiful build.
Those were just 15 of the many amazing plots in this contest. I could have reviewed more, but I didn't want this video to be hours long, but you can see some of them here in these clips. Something I failed to mention from the beginning was this contest was the collaboration effort of both the bakery server and Builder's Refuge, but the contest was held on the latter, so if you want to visit the plot world, you can go to /warp solitary on Builder's Refuge. However, a lot of credit is also due to many of the bakers who also helped pull this together. Thanks to everyone who organized this contest and for keeping it running smoothly. Also, thanks for asking me to judge. I'm very grateful to have this experience. It was definitely a lot of work. I went through each plot multiple times, and having to judge for multiple categories and nearly 100 plots took many hours over many days to do it, but it was very rewarding in that I got to see a lot of amazing builds and got to interact with many of you. I often logged into the contest world while it was going on to observe how things were going because I love the energetic atmosphere that contests can bring. And to commemorate this contest, I put together just a quick little montage of some of you that I managed to catch building. Whether or not you finished this contest, it was really great to see all of the builds coming together. And we're going to close off this video with that, but I hope you all have a good rest of your day or night, and I hope to see you all again soon.